Sunghir, Russia, 1964. Soviet archaeologists digging through frozen ground roughly 160 miles northeast of Moscow uncover something that shouldn't exist. At first, it looks like an ordinary Ice Age burial. Then they notice something impossible. Two children, buried head to head, surrounded by more than 10,000 ivory beads. Every single bead was carved by hand from mammoth tusk using nothing but stone tools. Archaeologists estimate each one took around 45 minutes to make. Thousands of hours of labor, buried in the ground, never to be worn again. But the beads weren't scattered randomly. They traced the exact outline of clothing that had completely rotted away. Shirts, trousers, leggings, even footwear, leaving behind only the ornamental skeleton of what these children once wore. This burial is roughly 34,000 years old. Winter temperatures here regularly fall to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to kill an unprotected person in well under an hour, with frostbite developing in minutes. And yet the evidence says these people didn't just survive here. They thrived. They raised families. They buried their children with more craftsmanship than most Ice Age adults ever received. For decades, archaeologists believed the explanation was simple. Modern humans survived the Ice Age because we were intelligent. We had fire. We found shelter in caves. But Sunghir doesn't fit that explanation. There is no cave here. No evidence of a sophisticated heated structure capable of supporting year-round life in one of the harshest climates on Earth. Something else was keeping these people alive, and archaeologists spent decades trying to figure out what it was. Then the mystery became even harder to explain. Neanderthals had already lived in cold Europe for more than 300,000 years before modern humans arrived. They had thicker bones, barrel-shaped chests, shorter limbs. Bodies literally shaped by evolution to conserve heat. If any human species should have conquered the Ice Age, it should have been them. But that's not what happened. Neanderthal sites cluster in milder regions, river valleys, forests, and caves protected from the worst winds. They pushed the limits of survivable cold. They never truly crossed into the extreme. Modern humans did. And they did it surprisingly fast. So what changed? Part of the answer was a tool barely larger than a matchstick, an eyed sewing needle. One of the oldest known examples was discovered in Siberia's Denisova cave and dates to roughly 50,000 years ago. It may look insignificant. In reality, it changed what it meant to survive. Before sewing, animal hides were simply wrapped around the body. They blocked some wind, but gaps remained around the neck, waist, and arms. Every gap leaked precious body heat. Scientists call this convective heat loss. The idea is simple. Every gust of wind strips away the thin layer of warm air surrounding your body. Now imagine standing in a blizzard. Every few seconds, the wind steals your blanket. A fitted, sewn garment seals those gaps. It sounds like a small improvement. In reality, it may have been the difference between waking up the next morning or never waking up at all. But even a perfectly sewn coat couldn't explain Sunghir. You can stitch clothing together and still freeze to death if you're using the wrong materials. The next clue wasn't found in a grave, it was found in the trash. At ancient hunting camps across Siberia and Eastern Europe, archaeologists expected to find mammoth and reindeer bones. Instead, they kept discovering unusually large numbers of wolves, Arctic foxes, and wolverines. That made no sense. These animals provide very little meat. If Ice Age hunters were focused only on food, they weren't worth the effort. Then researchers realized they weren't hunting them for meat. They were hunting them for fur. Not just any fur, the right fur. Wolverine fur is still valued by Arctic communities today because frost from your own breath can be brushed away far more easily than on many other furs. In extreme cold, an ice-covered hood pressed against your face can lead to frostbite frighteningly fast. Somehow, Ice Age humans had already discovered which animal solved that problem, and they built hunting strategies around it. But that still wasn't enough. Researchers returned to the Sunghir burials. This time, they looked at the pattern of the beads. What they found changed everything. The beads didn't outline one garment, they outlined several. An inner layer, an outer layer, separate coverings for the legs, separate footwear, possibly even a fitted cap. This wasn't just clothing, it was a complete survival system. The same principle still used in modern winter gear. A layer that manages moisture, a layer that traps warm air, a layer that blocks wind and snow. 34,000 years before modern outdoor equipment. That kind of engineering doesn't appear overnight. Someone had to experiment, someone had to fail, someone had to survive long enough to improve the design. And then they had to teach someone else. Which brings us back to the children. Those 10,000 beads weren't sewn onto the clothing of legendary hunters. They were sewn onto the burial garments of children. Children who, according to skeletal analysis, may never have been physically capable of contributing much hunting labor at all. Yet they received one of the richest Ice Age burials ever discovered. Why? The leading explanation isn't about strength or hunting skill. It's about knowledge. In an environment where one mistake could mean death, survival depended on knowing which animals to hunt, which furs resisted frost, how to layer clothing, when to travel, when to stay put, and how to prepare for winters no human body was built to endure. That knowledge couldn't be reinvented every generation. It had to be remembered, protected, and passed on. The real secret of Sunghir was never just the needle. It was never just the fur. It wasn't even the layered clothing itself. It was humanity's extraordinary ability to accumulate knowledge, refine it, and pass it forward with enough precision that a slow, hairless species with no claws and no natural cold adaptations could survive where evolution alone had failed. A wolverine survives the Arctic because evolution built the perfect fur. Humans survived because they built the perfect idea. Then they taught it. Every one of those 10,000 beads represents far more than decoration. They represent knowledge. Knowledge stitched into clothing, passed from one generation to the next. Because the greatest survival tool humans ever invented wasn't made from stone, or bone, or mammoth ivory. It was the ability to learn from one another, to teach, and to make sure that what one generation discovered never died with them. Thanks for watching. Every discovery tells another chapter of the human story. If you enjoyed this journey into the Ice Age, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join me for the next adventure. See you in the next one.